This is Goss's Garage with Pat Goss, co-host of PBS's MotorWeek. He'll take your calls and comments now at 844-885-4677 or email him at radio@goss-garage.com. And now, Pat Goss.
Hi everybody, and welcome to another edition of Goss's Garage. I'm Pat Goss. If you'd like to talk about cars, give us a call. Love to talk to you. And we're going to be talking to John Davis, the host of MotorWeek, coming up very shortly. But first, this very important message for this very important holiday. According to the National Highway Traffic Safety Admission, 36 traffic fatalities occur per day on average in the United States due to crashes involving an alcohol-impaired driver. But at certain times of the year, that number rises dramatically. For example, the number soared to 54 per day over the New Year's holiday. One of those unfortunate souls, please don't be one of those unfortunate souls. Now, what follows is extremely graphic, but please listen because it can happen to you. It can happen to anyone. It comes from a university study done some years ago. It was done before airbags were standard, but it's still relevant because the physics of accidents don't change. Although today's cars are far safer, no safety device can save your life in a non-survivable accident because the laws of physics can't be reversed. You're driving at 60 miles per hour or 88 feet per second. Your speed is legal, but it's too fast for conditions, and you lose control. Directly in your path is a large tree, and your life ends in less than 1 second. Here's the way it works. At 1/10 of a second, the front bumper and trim of the car collapses. Pieces of metal and plastic penetrate the tree up to 1 inch or more. At 2/10 of a second, the hood and its safety retainers crumple and smash into the windshield. The rear wheels are still spinning as the back of the car is thrown into the air from the force of the crash. The front of the car distorts, the crumple zones collapse, and the front fenders are forced back past the front doors. The structure of the car tries to absorb more energy than physically possible and begins to slow the terrific forward momentum of the car. But inside the car, your body is still moving forward at 60 miles per hour or 3 Gs. Now, your body weighs about 3,200 pounds. Momentum pushes your legs forward with so much force, your knees break. At 3/10 of a second, your body lifts from the seat, forcing the seat belt to its limit, and your broken knees are against the dashboard. The steel inner frame of the steering wheel bends under your death grip. The airbag has deployed, absorbing some of the energy of the crash, but this is a non-survivable accident, and no amount of safety equipment can save your life. At 4/10 of a second, the car's front 24 inches have been destroyed, but the back of the car is still traveling forward at about 35 miles an hour. Worse, your brain continues traveling at 60 miles per hour inside your skull until it violently crashes against the inside of your skull. The engine crashes into the tree and the rear of the car continues upward, now almost vertical. The rear of the car raises so high it scrapes bark off the lower tree branches. At 5/10 of a second, your fear-frozen hands severely bend the steering wheel. The force of the accident displaces the steering column, pushing the steering wheel against your chest and abdomen, crushing your lungs and rupturing arteries. Blood begins to fill your severely injured lungs. At 6/10 of a second, your feet are ripped from your shoes. The brake pedal shears off. The chassis bends in the middle. Your head smashes into the car's body. the rear of the car falls back to earth and the still spinning rear wheels dig into the ground. At 0.7 of a second, the entire body of the car is forced out of shape, and in one last convulsion, the floor of the car distorts, pushing the seat upward and forward, further pinning and crushing your body. Blood gushes from your mouth, your heart stops beating, you are dead. Elapsed time, 0.7 of 1 second. During this holiday season and every day of the year, please everyone, don't drink and drive, and don't drive distracted. Have a happy, safe New Year. All right. Please, everybody, be careful out there. All right. John Davis from MotorWeek. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Pat, and almost Happy New Year. How are you?
I am doing most excellent. Thank you very much.
There's good.
So, what you got for us today?
Okay, you know the answer to this. What is the most common question you get asked this time of year about new cars? Not repairs, but new cars.
New cars? What should I buy? I don't know.
That's it. No, it's not so much what should I buy, but is this week coming up to New Year's and New Year's Day, are they the best times of the year to buy a car? There are lots of articles out there. There's been a lot of research done on it. I get the question all the time, and you know what? The simple answer is yes. Now, I know some of your listeners are listening to this show on a delayed basis, but today is the Saturday before New Year's. Also, around most of the country, there is a blanket of really chilly weather and some snow. That makes today, Saturday, and actually Monday, New Year's Day, because most dealers will be open, great days to buy a car because there's going to be so many salespeople just sitting around. They have to be there twiddling their thumbs that if you've been on the fence, or maybe you've already been in to look at the car once and you want to make sure you get the best deal, we're at the end of the year, we're at the end of the month. There's all kinds of incentives, especially on 2017 models. Go down, see if you can't get that extra few $100 off, maybe more. I mean, the TV ads around Christmas have been absolutely swamped with zero financing for 6 and 7 years, all sorts of cash back. There's a big pickup truck race going on to make Chevrolet's trying to make sure they stay well ahead of Ram. So anyway, that's the question I get a lot, and the answer is simply yes. And actually, you've got through Tuesday the 2nd, because that's when the final sales will be closed that will count towards the manufacturer's total for 2017 and towards the dealer total. And they get a lot of extra bennies for salespeople and for the dealership owners if they meet certain targets at the end of the year. So it's all about bragging rights for them. It's all about saving a little bit more money for you.
You know, that's that business with the dealership and so on. A lot of people don't seem to realize that typically there are monthly plateaus, as the manufacturers call them, that a dealer achieves a certain plateau. Then they get a payback retroactive to the first car they sold that month, and there are similar things for the end of the year. So, you know, in some cases, I've seen situations when I was involved with dealerships where we would sell a car and take a huge loss on it at the end of the month, or especially at the end of the year, because we might lose $4,000 or $5,000, but get $20,000 in rebates just because that one car would put us over the top.
That's really true. And, you know, the dealers get ranked at the end of the year, how well they do in their area. The top dealer principals then get taken on really fancy trips. I mean, there's this whole world behind the actual retail aspect of a car that most people never see and that they work very hard to keep secret.
Oh, yeah.
There is one more important thing, though, and you know this as well as I do. When you go into a dealership, if you go in and just expect them to give you the car at the best price, it's probably not going to happen. Do your homework. If you still get a newspaper, clip out the ads, take that in, go online, look at what incentives are being offered, and then ask, is there anything else that is available on this car that I don't know about to save me money? Because, you can trap them here. If they lie to you, you've got some recourse down the road if you find out otherwise. But you have to ask. This process of going in and and when you go online these days, if everybody says go online and make your deal. Well, you know what? That doesn't work anymore because everybody does it. So you go online and you send an email to the dealer, and they say, "Nah, the price on the website is the final price." Well, that's just bull. They know, though, if they can get you into the shop, they can probably make a deal with you if you're that serious. A few years ago, I bought a couple of cars online, and it was really kind of easy. My last couple of experiences have been that everybody's doing it, and they just don't want to be bothered with it. They want to see in the flesh, more now than ever.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and it's amazing how much stronger your negotiation can be if you're sitting there and you're a qualified buyer and you're in front of a person, and it makes all the difference in the world. Online, you're just a faceless name.
Now, I will say, having said that, if you hate the whole idea of negotiating, and a lot of people do, there are services, TrueCar, your company that probably has a credit union that has a company, and they can take some of that onus away from you. But they get you a decent price, If you're really a penny pincher and you want to get the best possible price, you got to do it in person. But, don't overlook the 2017 models. Remember, come January 2nd or 3rd, whenever they stop counting, those will be considered a year old. And those models, they really want to get off the lot. You have to be a little less picky. Maybe if you want a red car, you might have to take a white or black or blue one. But, there's still an awful lot of stuff out there. And I know you probably have to go to a break. One more thing. Right now, sedans are not selling. If you're a four-door sedan person, you're really in the catbird seat. And even I've been amazed at some of the deals available on popular SUVs.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but sedans, oh, my goodness.
They'll pay you to take them.
Almost.
Not quite. Not quite, but almost.
All right. We'll take a break. More with John Davis, the host of MotorWeek, coming up here on Goss's Garage.
Stay tuned. Pat will take your calls next at 844-885-4677. Goss's Garage continues in a moment.
Never drive with a bad attitude. I know that's hard with so many stupid, distracted, aggressive, and just plain rude drivers on the road, but it really is the safe thing to do. I drive a lot, and I used to see reckless, rude, or aggressive drivers maybe once a month. But today, it seems like every other driver is doing something stupid. When it was sporadic, it wasn't so hard to deal with, but now it seems like there's always an idiot 3 feet from my rear bumper or weaving into my lane or cutting me off. Distracted? Probably. Dangerous? Absolutely. But there's nothing to do except drive defensively and not aggravate other drivers. Much as I'd like to, I don't middle finger the offending driver, and definitely don't hit my brakes to scare a tailgater. Initially, these situations may be simple mistakes, but an aggressive response to a mistake can escalate it into a personal confrontation, which can easily turn into road rage. Unfortunately, you have no idea which one of these idiots will try to hurt you with their car, a weapon, or their fists. Also, never make direct eye contact with the offending driver. If you're the offender, be courteous and get out of the way. Whether it's a mistake or intentional aggression, remember, back down, yield, let it go. It takes brains to overcome anger. Use your brain. Be smart. This news and views is from Auto Care Pro magazine and deals with automatic transmissions.
Although their story relates to an Audi that refused to shift, it could apply to most cars. In this case, the tech did all the proper preliminary tests, including a visual inspection of related parts, which revealed a badly corroded transmission computer. Seems someone had replaced the cabin air filter and didn't properly install its cover. Now, this allowed water to leak onto the computer, and over time the water caused corrosion and no shift. A new module made the Audi shift like new. The tech also reinstalled the cabin air filter cover properly. There are two primary lessons here. First, just because the symptoms are horrific doesn't mean the cause is horrific. In fact, seemingly huge problems may be cheap to fix. Second, this is a case where you'll probably be taken if you didn't pick a good shop. That's because you've already convinced yourself you need a major repair, and when the shop confirms what you suspect, you just go for it. This shop could have easily sold a completely unnecessary transmission, but instead was honest and saved the owner thousands of dollars. So select your shop carefully. Rather than just cheap, look for ASE certification, skill, quality, and above all, honesty. Too often the cheapest estimates come from shops with overall lower skill sets, or in some cases something much worse, more greed and less honesty.
This is Goss's Garage with Pat Goss. Call the show now at 844-885-4677.
Oh, now there's a picture for you. If you see these two at the post office, time to get out of there. Of course, that bobblehead is John Davis from MotorWeek and myself. Now, for those enjoying Goss Garage on TuneIn.com, please note our new showtime every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. All right, back with John Davis, host of MotorWeek. John, what else you got for us?
Well, it's this, at the end of the year, you always get all these articles, and they've actually been coming all year, about the demise of the car as we know it and the internal combustion engine, and everybody's going to be Ubered all over every place, and, all self-driving. And there's just a lot of them out there, a lot of them even showing up in some industry publications. But here's an interesting figure. There's one article that's floating around right now that says, in big, almost headlines, by 2035, I believe it is, they expect to have something in the idea of 21 million self-driving cars on the road in the U.S. Well, that sounds like a huge number. But what have we got on the road today, Pat? Isn't it something like 600 million vehicles?
Yeah, something like that. It's a huge number.
It's a huge number. So you're talking about 4% of the cars might be self-driving cars almost 20 years from now. I guess I'm having a real hard time wrapping my hands around why this is nearly as significant as they talk about. I mean, this is the same kind of projections they've made about electric cars that have never really come true. But if you go on to read the articles, the really good ones, they do point out that, at least initially, they'll have something called geofencing, which means autonomous vehicles and traditional cars will not be on the same roads. They'll maybe require autonomous cars inside certain big cities. We know Europe is already talking about doing that. And you won't be able to bring in traditional cars during certain time. Of course, cars will talk to each other. Well, that is if they're new enough, or they have some other device like your cell phone is doing it. The more I read about this stuff, and the more I read about how rapidly the industry is going to change, the more I just scratch my head and think, I still can't see how they expect to pry the keys or the key fob out of the hands of 200 million American drivers, or whatever the number is, from ages 16 to the 80s, over any kind of reasonable period, less than maybe 50 to 100 years at minimum. I just don't see it. I've been asked sometimes, to give my comments on this, and I know I sound like kind of a a cold water blanket, because I just don't believe all this stuff's going to happen any kind of quickness like they claim, like a lot of people claim.
Well, I've seen some numbers that if we started scrapping the current fleet right now, that it would take something like 40 years just to scrap the existing cars.
That's a good number. I believe that.
Yeah.
I mean, because there's just physically isn't enough space to store them all. What are we going to do? Retire them all to the desert like we do airplanes?
Yeah, I mean, even if we grind them up, where do we put all of the metal and all the recyclables and everything? I mean, there's a lot more to this than just, oh, we're going to build X number of cars.
You hit on another point. All of these new cars they're talking about, because they will be self-driving, they will be probably made out of plastics and other lightweight materials, because they're all, of course, being projected to be electric powered.
Right.
Where are we going to get all the rare earth minerals to make all those batteries? That's another one. Oh, there was one more thing I read, and this really is humorous. It was saying, well, we'll get into our electric car and we'll drive anywhere we want to go. Of course, we'll have to take a pause in a lounge or something while the batteries are recharged, or maybe perhaps stay overnight in a motel. Doesn't that sound what they used to have to do when they had stagecoaches running across the country? Or even early air travel, where the planes couldn't fly at night. They would land somewhere and put you up in a hotel till the next morning.
Yeah.
Americans aren't going, they're not going to stand for that kind of stuff.
Well,
and go ahead.
And on top of that, you know, they talk about the savings with the electricity and so on, but now you're going to be put up in a hotel. You got to pay for that. You got to pay for the recharge. You got to pay for all of this stuff. All of a sudden, the savings on gasoline don't look so great.
And now, just take a look at what happened in Houston. Suppose all of those vehicles down there had been electrically powered after the hurricane hit, which they'd still be going nowhere. So, and I got one more little tidbit. Here's something most people don't know. When you take your electric car, whether it's a Tesla or what other, into the supercharger stations, the ones that basically will recharge your car to 80% of their battery in 45 minutes. You know what? That hurts the battery.
Yes.
Every time you do that, you're taking life away from the battery. So if you're doing that, say, once a week over the course of a year, what is that going to do to your car battery? And then, my gosh, talk about replacing it.
Fortunately, those batteries are pretty cheap. I think, what, $1.99 or something? Right.
No, you were mistaking that with the new iPhone battery.
Okay. That's for darn sure. You know, some of them are not all that expensive. We've done a couple that are under $2,000, but gosh, some
But I
of
bet
them
that was for a small one, for like a hybrid.
Yeah, it was for a Prius.
Yeah.
Of course, we haven't seen any in a pure electric car, but I have a friend who has a Nissan Leaf, and his battery is testing at about 80%, and it's not going to be, he's got 100,000 miles on it, and it's not going to be long before he needs a battery, and looks like it could be expensive.
Yeah, there is that company that recycles them, but even then, you're still talking about a major repair, because the batteries are not designed, at least so far, they haven't been designed to be easily removed from the pure electrics.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the other thing that people don't count on. They say, well, okay, they check the price of the battery, but then some of these things require a substantial amount of labor to install them.
Yeah, I don't know what the average cost of labor is in auto repair anymore, but I'm sure it's $100 an hour or more.
Oh yeah, between 100 and 150 an hour, depending on the location in the country and the shop and so on. Yeah, it's. I like the way the armchair people like to, you know, tell us about all this stuff, but there's a practical side to it that nobody ever seems to talk about.
Yeah. Hey, before I have to go, I want to switch gears, if you don't mind. I actually have a conundrum that I want your opinion on.
Okay.
All right. I have a pickup truck that sits outside. Now, every year or I should say about every 18 months, the rodents get at it and either chew through a gas line or some kind of wire or something. And, I know all the things it could be. It's probably because the wires are covered with a material they like, et cetera, et cetera. What would you do to help cut down that incidence of a vehicle that's sitting outside? You can't get up under there and cover everything in some kind of a, stainless steel wool or anything. Is there anything you would try to cut down on the incidence? Because, it's like $400 to $500 a pop.
Yeah, it gets expensive after a while. Well,
yeah.
Of course, the first thing that most people agree on is that there must be some kind of a food source someplace near the truck.
Even though it could just be the wiring is attracting them because it's made with soybeans?
Typically, something else attracts them, and when they get there, they find the wires desirable. And,
okay.
Lots of times it'll be squirrels, and you got an oak tree or something, something like that they like to eat, and they get near the vehicle, and especially if the vehicle has been run in the last few hours, it's warm.
Nice and warm.
Yeah.
Well, I hadn't thought about, when you say food source, I was thinking, garbage, but you're talking about things like acorns, so that's a possibility.
Yeah. And they get in the neighborhood, and then they get up into the vehicle and have themselves a full-on banquet.
Oh yeah, it's a condo and a buffet all rolled into one. Yeah.
But I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know of any single thing, and I get a lot of questions on this. I don't know of any single thing that really works. One that does work is very labor intensive, and that is Honda has a tape that you can wrap stuff with. It has capsaicin in it. And if there was a way to get capsaicin or something similar to that to stick that you could spray onto the wires and hoses and so on, that would be great. But the problem is it washes right off.
Washes right off, yeah. Yeah, one of the problems we ran into this time is they ate through the end of a particular nipple on an evaporative canister. And, of course, it's an old enough truck that you can't get that piece anymore, so they're gluing it back together. But it's like as vehicles get older, this becomes even more of a problem just because you can't always, except for junkyards, you can't get some of the parts.
Yeah, we've got 2 cars in the shop here right now that we're building with evaporative hoses that they were originally made out of plastic, and we have to use plastic elbows and emissions hose and stuff like that and make up a whole new assembly under the hood. And that gets expensive because
you're becoming a plumber.
Exactly. And it's expensive because it takes a lot of time. You got to cut and fit and fabricate all this stuff, and it's a real problem. But I wish I had an answer, but unfortunately I don't.
No silver bullet. Thank you for asking for your remarks, though. I'll think about it. We do have oak trees around, so maybe that's what they're coming from.
Could be. I've got one oak tree, giant, great big thing, but it's a pin oak, so I don't think that. I haven't seen any acorns around.
Oh, I got lots of them. They sound like rocks falling from the sky when they get going.
Uh-huh. So, beautiful trees, but they can be a real problem. I'm bad because I love trees, and I would just hate to have anything happen to one of my trees, but
Oh no! Don't cut them all down. You know, don't do that.
oh no, I never, I don't do that.
Good.
I spend money on actually trying to save them and keep them looking good and so on.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much.
All righty. Well, I know you have to depart, so I want to thank you.
I do want to say thank you. Well, I appreciate it. And I thank you for letting me come on. And it was a great 2017, and I hope you have a wonderful 2018.
And likewise to you, John. Thank you so very much for everything. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, sir.
All right. Okay, folks, we are going to take a break. We'll be right back here on Goss's Garage.
Operators are standing by to take your call for Pat at 844-885-4677. Goss's Garage continues in a moment.
Think you'll pocket a lot more money if you sell rather than trade your car? Perhaps, but appearance sells cars, and your poor car is a bit grungy. There's dull paint, that ugly coffee stain on the seat, and a sweaty arm stain on the door, plus crumbs in every crack and crevice. Yep, when you look close, it's kind of ugly, and sadly for you, most used cars are bought on looks more than condition. That means a good cleanup job or pay a couple $100 to have it done. Next, because many used car buyers pull dipsticks and check fluids, you should clean the engine bay and change all the fluids. Buyers usually don't know what's good or bad, but someone on the internet says smart shoppers pull dipsticks, so buyers pull dipsticks, which often leads to questions about service and possible problems. Also, if the tires show any wear, buyers may assume there are worn front end parts. Don't forget the high cost of ads so people know it's for sale. And the questions. Is there a warranty? Will you take a trade? Is it inspected? Will you take a check? Can I give you $100 down and $100 a week? And so on. Now, a biggie. You might actually be risking your life, too. Where do you safely show a car so you don't have strangers eyeballing you and your home or trying to steal the car? When you look at the aggravation, work, expense, and dangers of selling a car, trading often looks really good. I get lots of air filter questions, and one of the most common deals with why air filters need to be replaced so often. Well, actually, they usually don't, yet many drivers wind up buying a new air filter at every oil change, which is utterly ridiculous. Drivers say techs tell them if they don't buy a new air filter, they'll waste a lot of gas. Maybe that statement comes from ignorance or maybe dishonesty, but either way, you lose. Decades ago, dirty air filters did waste gas, but today, not so much. Cars now use a sensor to measure the air coming through the air filter, and computers to mix exactly the right amount of gas to match that air. So even though a dirty air filter reduces airflow into the engine, it doesn't affect gas mileage because the computer is always precisely matching fuel to the incoming air. In other words, a dirty filter means less air, and less air means less gas, so there's never an imbalance between air and fuel. Certainly when a filter gets really, really dirty, it can cause performance problems, but even then it may not affect gas mileage. So how long do air filters last? Unless you drive in really dusty conditions, air filters usually last 30 to 60,000 miles. Overselling of air filters is an enormous problem, and the best way not to be taken is to learn how to check your own air filter and check it twice a year.
Now, back to Goss's Garage with your host, Pat Goss.
Folks, please subscribe to Goss's Garage on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook, and for more car tips, tricks, and money-saving ideas, visit goss-garage.com. All right, 844-885-4677 is the number. Remember, that number is active 24/7. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can call it. You can leave us a message. We will answer your question on the air, or we will call you back, whatever you tell us to do. So don't just hang up. If you don't get the person on the other end that you think you want to get, leave the message. We will get back to you one way or the other. Just tell us how you want us to contact you. And if you want us to call you, please leave a contact number. 844-885-4677, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. All right, want to say a big thank you to Wayne Discus of Mercedes-Benz of Annapolis, who helped me make a deal this week. See, I had some big-time thefts at my house. And in order to be frugal and get my money back, which probably will never happen other than my earning it and putting it back in my reserves, I had to get rid of my 17 Jeep Grand Cherokee. And Wayne helped me through a couple of deals, and I wound up with a BMW 535i, which is an utterly amazing car. But anyway, Wayne Discus, Mercedes-Benz of Annapolis, if you live in the Washington, D.C. area, this man, I've known him for years. We've done a lot of deals together. Great guy to deal with. All right. Herb says, recently I acquired a 2004 Honda S2000. Pretty rare car. I plan to garage this vehicle during the winter months here in Western Maryland. Can you suggest the most important steps to take? Number one step, fresh oil. Everybody says, oh, I'll change the oil in the spring. Hogwash. You change the oil before it goes into storage. Reason? Very simple. Oil sits inside the engine, sits between moving parts. Dirty oil has acid in it, has sulfuric acid, hydrochloric acid, and who knows how many other acids. Now, you're going to let the car sit. These moving parts are going to sit still for 2-3 months maybe. You got oil in there, the oil has acid. The acid has plenty of time to etch bearing surfaces and so on. No, it's not going to destroy the engine, but it could significantly shorten the life of the engine. So fresh oil. You don't want oil with acid in it during storage. Okay, that's number one. Now, you have to make a decision as to whether or not you are just going to let it sit and don't touch it, or if you're periodically going to drive it. Now, don't fall into the trap of thinking that, oh, gee, I'll start it up every week and let it run for 20 minutes or half an hour and everything will be hunky-dory. Excuse me, worst thing you can do, because all you do when you do that is you warm up the coolant for the engine. You don't warm up the oil, you don't warm up the transmission, you don't warm up the brakes, you don't warm up any other part of the car except the coolant. Now, what this does is makes you feel good. Oh, gee, you know, hey, I got it nice and warm here on the temperature gauge. The temperature gauge on most cars is only telling you the temperature of the coolant. So I got this up. All right, I'm fine. Well, reality is that because the engine isn't doing any work, number one, it isn't very efficient. And because it isn't very efficient, you build more moisture as a result of the combustion. Some of that moisture gets down into the oil. That moisture has contaminants that lead to the formation of things like sulfuric acid, because there's sulfur and different compounds that are used in gasoline and so on. So you're building more contamination and dumping it into the oil. So not a good thing. Now, what do you do? Well, either you drive the car for a minimum of a half an hour in order to get the oil temperature up and boil off some of these contaminants and so on, or you just leave it sit. You park it and you leave it there. So, you know, the normal thing is if it's going to be long-term storage, long-term is more than 3 months, you want to put oil in the cylinders and use fogging oil to fog the cylinders through the intake and so on. But if it's 3 months, it's normal winter time that you would leave it not operational, then what you do is you change the oil, you fill the fuel tank right up to the brim because less air means less moisture in the fuel system. You put a fuel system conditioner like Stay-Bil or Store and Start, or there's hundreds of them. You can find them at most hardware stores, any kind of auto parts store, and you know, even the department stores. You put that in the fuel tank, but put it in before you shut the car off. See, you want to put it in the conditioner, put the conditioner in the tank, fill the tank on top of the conditioner, which the agitation of the fuel coming into the tank will mix everything together. Then you run the car for at least 10 minutes because you want this conditioned fuel to travel completely through the entire fuel system. All right, you got that done. Now, it's a good idea to pump the tires up if it's going to sit on the ground. Pump them up probably 25% or more above their normal, because that'll help prevent flat spotting on the tires. The other thing you want to do is make sure you have a good battery maintainer, not a trickle charger, not a battery charger, a battery maintainer. You connect that to the battery and you plug it in and you let it sit there. And the reason for that is a battery maintainer will act just like the alternator on the car. As the battery sits, it'll naturally discharge. Now, when it reaches a discharge level that is pre-programmed into the maintainer will come on, it'll charge the battery. As the battery charge level comes up, it'll cut back, cut back, cut back, and cut off. Battery chargers, on the other hand, don't cut off. These trickle chargers, you say, well, it's only 1/8 of an amp. Well, 1/8 of an amp for weeks or months can cook a battery, just destroy it. So, battery maintainer, top off all the fluids and everything, and if it's due for service, get the service done before it goes into storage. Do the brakes and the brake fluid and all the other fluids that might need to be done. And that way, when spring comes, you'll be ready to roll. And the car will start, it'll run, you won't have fuel problems, you won't have fuel system problems. Not rocket science, but it's amazing how many people do it wrong. All right, we're going to take our last break. We'll be right back on Goss's Garage.
Stay tuned. Pat will take your calls next at 844-885-4677. That's 844-885-GOSS. Goss's Garage continues in a moment.
Space Saver spare tires sure do look silly, but if you use them properly, they will get you home safely. Now, a common problem with them is low air pressure. Spares are buried in the trunk and no one ever seems to check their pressure. Plus, they typically require much higher pressure than your regular tires. Also, Space Saver spares have limits on how far and how fast you can drive on them. Bottom line, always read and follow the caution warnings on their labels and sidewalls. Oh yeah, don't be one of those poor schmucks with a flat tire and a flat spare. Check your spare once a month. While checking the spare, look at the jack handle, and the lug wrench to be sure everything is there and in working order. The best spare tire in the world is useless without the tools to put it on the car. Some cars may even require special lug nuts to mount the spare. If those special lug nuts are missing, you will have no safe way to use your spare. Do you use the proper strategy when buying replacement parts for your car or truck? Hi, I'm Pat Goss for Goss's Garage, and I've noticed that many of you who buy auto parts make a huge mistake. You shop for one and only one thing: price. Now, naturally, price is important, but quality is more important. When you buy the cheapest part in town, you may sacrifice quality, and less quality often means shorter life and less reliability. In some cases, the cheapest part may even compromise vehicle safety. For the best value from the parts you buy, look for the lowest price, but only on high-quality parts. When you compare prices, be sure you're comparing parts that have the same specifications. And never buy a part with a lower rating than your car requires. What many drivers don't realize is cheap can be very costly in the end. Quality usually costs less per mile over the long haul. I'm Pat Goss for Goss's Garage.
This is Goss's Garage with Pat Goss. Call the show now at 844-885-4677. That's 844-885-GOSS. And now, Pat Goss.
Hey folks, please subscribe to Goss's Garage on YouTube, follow us on Facebook, and for more car tips, tricks, and money-saving ideas, visit goss-garage.com. 844-885-4677 if you have something you would like to talk about that deals with an automobile. And speaking of that, Victor is from Chicago. And good morning, Pat. My name is Victor from Chicago. I have a quick question. How long should I warm up my car during the winter? Oh boy, how many times do I get that question every week? I don't even count them anymore. For the most part, warming a car is a very, very bad idea. Now, I know your parents did it, your grandparents did it, your great-grandparents did it. Everybody has done it forever on cars. And somewhere along the line, the reason for it got lost. Because everybody thinks, oh, we got to warm up the car, because if we don't warm up the car, something horrible is going to happen to it. Hogwash. Nothing horrible is going to happen to it. Something horrible might happen to it if you get into a routine of letting it warm up every cold morning. Very, very bad for a car. Why did this begin? Well, cars used to have a device called a carburetor. And a carburetor had a choke. And chokes were cantankerous. Carburetors were finicky. And the majority of cars, after they had a few miles on them, they just didn't like to run all that well until they were warmed up. So rather than try to accelerate quickly through an intersection or something, which if you hadn't let the car warm up, chances are it would cough, sputter, stall, and here you are in the line of fire in the middle of an intersection with an 18-wheeler bearing down on you or something equally ominous. So everybody got in the habit of warming their cars up, so when they actually started to move, there was no problem with hesitation, backfiring or stalling or anything like that. Well, carburetors are long gone. Chokes are long gone. Cars don't have chokes. Cars don't have carburetors. They have fuel injection. Fuel injection did away with all of that. Now, I mean, there was a safety reason back in the day when carburetors were on cars, but now there's no safety reason and there's no mechanical reason to let the car warm up. Now, certainly there are going to be some days where you need to let it warm up for a few minutes because you got ice on it or something that is making it impractical or unsafe to drive until things are thawed off. So how long normally should you let it warm up? 60 to 120 seconds. 1 to 2 minutes maximum. Now, granted, your butt is not going to be as comfortable as when you hit your remote starter button and, oh, gee, you sit in a house and have another cup of coffee and wait for the car to warm up so when you plant your ass in the seat, it isn't going to be chilly on your cheeks. Well, that's horrible for your car because it builds a lot of contamination in the oil. Doesn't warm anything, just like I said on the previous thing, doesn't warm up anything except the coolant. The oil in the engine is still stone cold 20 minutes later because an engine sitting and idling, the oil temperature barely moves on most cars. The transmission is stone cold. The power steering, if it has hydraulic power steering, it's stone cold. The brake system is stone cold. All of these things, the bearings and the wheels and all of these things are absolutely cold because you haven't warmed them up. But you warmed up the coolant and you had a nice warm place to plant your butt. Now you go out and the coolant, the temperature gauge says normal. Well, I'm going to drive this sucker. So you get out there, go like hell, foot on the floorboard. Well, that is horrible, absolutely horrible for the car. See, at that point, the oil isn't warm, you're not getting proper lubrication, you're going like stink, and you're adding extra wear to the parts in the car. You're going faster, harder than you should because the other parts aren't warmed up. The transmission isn't shifting as it should because the fluid is cold. So 60 to 20 seconds, then drive it gently. Now, gently doesn't mean that you have to go slow. Gently means that you don't go beyond half throttle during acceleration. I mean, you can drive 60 miles an hour. That's still gentle as long as you don't have your foot on the floorboard like so many of you do. And I don't understand that. Foot on the floorboard, just going like crazy from every traffic light. I don't know how you afford the gas, number one. I don't know how you afford replacing transmissions and so on, number two, but you seem to like it, so more power to you. But don't do it when the car is cold. Drive it gently, less than half throttle, accelerate gently, go whatever speed you want. I mean, certainly not 100 miles an hour. I don't think there's any place much in this country that you could do that, but anyway, 60 to 120 seconds on the warm-up. All right. John, I bought an 84 Camaro that was in a field in Pennsylvania that did not run. Oh boy. The body and frame are in very good condition. This is a project car. Lady I bought it from said there was a crate motor installed, but they could not get it running. I did get running, but it would not idle and vacuum is low, 10 inches. After checking valve timing, I pulled the timing cover and checked gear alignment, installing new intake gasket and rebuilding the carburetor, setting ignition timing, still the same problem. Also can hear misfiring in the exhaust and backfiring through the carburetor. I suspect leak between intake and exhaust ports. Ooh, why would you suspect that? I think you may have been putting too much brain power into the fourth beer of the evening while relaxing watching TV. Yeah, I suppose that is possible. But if you did your intake manifold gasket properly, you would have used a machinist straight edge or some kind of a straight edge. You could use an aluminum yardstick for that matter. They're accurate enough to check the trueness of the ports on the intake manifold. Now, I've heard people talk about junk like this. Oh, gee, got problems between the intake and exhaust or ports, and you know, how often do we see it? Once in 100 blue moons. Anyway, you know, certainly if the manifold is warped or damaged somehow, yes. But if you did the gasket job right, no, I wouldn't even consider it. All right, now, I did check compression before I even started working on the engine, and all cylinders are 180 pounds. Whoa. Now that tells us something right there. That compression is high for that engine. So, what would cause high compression? Well, typically one thing, and that is an exhaust blockage. So, what I did is I wrote back to John. I said, sure do. You want to know what I thought might be wrong? Unbolt the exhaust at the manifolds and let it drop down. Then see how it runs. Your description and what you have ruled out screams melted catalytic converters. All right, well, I probably shouldn't have said catalytic converters because obviously John keyed in on that. He wrote me, oh, well, I didn't tell you that I took the catalytic converters off of it, put test pipes in place of the converter. Okay, so what I should have said is it screams exhaust restriction. And the answer would still be the same. To get it out of the picture, drop the exhaust pipe. Now why? Because GM on some cars used a 2-layer exhaust pipe. Now, what happened on a lot of these was thermal shock. So you've got one layer, an inside layer, and then an outside layer, and that reduces noise. And thermal shock. You're driving down the road, you run into a deep puddle. The engine is hot, the exhaust pipe is hot. You hit this deep puddle, and the cold water causes the inside of the pipe to collapse. Just boom, it's closed off. Compression goes up, vacuum goes down. Car doesn't run, has no power. Same symptoms as a bad catalytic converter. So the advice would still be the same. Remove the exhaust pipe, drop it down, and see what happens. Now, another thing that was common on some GM cars is where the exhaust manifold on the front runner, on the ones that drop down below the spark plugs, the front runner in the bend over time, especially this has a crate engine in it, so it had a bad engine before. If they burn oil, they build carbon deposits in that curve in the exhaust manifold, and you have one port that is completely blocked off. And then what happens is, when the intake valves open on that cylinder, that exhaust from the burning fuel in there that was supposed to push the piston down, really it did, but the exhaust is left over, that comes back into the intake, drops the vacuum reading, and the car doesn't run. It misses, it pops, it sputters, it does all kinds of things because the exhaust does two things. It changes the air-fuel mixture and it drops vacuum readings. So two very, very common problems that I would really look into on that Camaro. 844-885-4677. We're going to get on out of here. During the week, give us a call. Leave us a message. We'd love to talk about your car problem here on the show. And one thing for sure, I want to wish everybody a happy, safe New Year. Thanks for listening. Thanks to Steve McMillan for producing today's show. For everyone here at Goss's Garage, I'm Pat Goss. Until next time, drive gently. We'll see ya.